Welcome everyone. It's 5:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all for joining tonight. It's the first meeting to discuss land use and development. So as we start a new topic area, I just want to introduce myself for those who may be joining us for the first time. My name is Malini Sims. I'm a principal planner with the town. I am joined tonight by Bayer Vela, planning manager, as well as Paul Melcher, the community and economic development director. Our role is to support you through the discussion tonight. So before we get really started, I do want to let anyone who, if this is your first meeting or first time joining this group, to introduce yourself. I also ask folks that if you can, to please turn your camera on. It helps us be able to get to know each other virtually until we have our in-person meetings. So if this is your first meeting or first time joining this group, if you would please raise your virtual hand. Joe, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Joe Branduber. This is my first time in joining this group. I'm on the Economic Development and Financial Planning Committee.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for joining. Looking at everyone, it seems like most everyone else has been part of this group. So I just have a brief presentation until we launch into the discussion. So just one moment. All right. So tonight, our purpose is to gather additional guidance and ideas related to the priorities that residents shared last year about growth and development. I do want to thank all of you who took the time to do the homework and the survey questions. As you probably realized, we have a lot of topics to go through tonight that are that have a lot of variety to them. I don't expect us to get through everything tonight, but the order is a bit purposeful because it's used to set as a starting point for our next meeting about the land use map. So tonight we will go through the factors for a central gathering area, mixed use, and redevelopment. We'll talk about compatibility, electric vehicles, and utilities. And then hopefully we'll be able to start the conversation about amendment types to the plan as well as a balanced approach and land use map. Again, those last ones, we do expect to continue the conversation on April 14th at your next meeting. I do want to remind folks that that meeting is in person because we will be discussing the land use map. So it's really important that hopefully all of you are able to attend that meeting. Now, our number one goal is to make sure that the plan represents and honors what residents said over the past year. The responses to the survey, additional comments from over 90 events and online, as well as the legal requirements were the basis for the questions that were posed to the group for our discussion this evening. Now, your help is needed to give more context and guidance to help craft goals, policies, and implementation actions. So through a statistically projectable survey, residents identified the top priorities that they would like to see for the remaining land in Oro Valley. 58% would like a central gathering area with opportunities to shop, dine, as well as a performing or visual arts center. Having more things to do, as well as employment and housing options, retail and restaurants were also cited. Now, staff also surveyed and met with the development community. The results from those outreach efforts are on ovpathforward.com. But when it comes to specifically mixed use and redevelopment, they would like this group to consider zoning regulations, so updating the code to support mixed use zoning, fixing conflicts in the code, specifically in the R6, which is our multifamily zoning district, and looking at the standards for planned area development. So what planned area developments are is they create right size or right fit zoning requirements for sites. They also would like the group to consider looking at the review process and maybe possibly allowing some applications to be administratively approved, and by creating more certainty by making sure the code is a little bit more specific, especially for projects that the community wants to see. And overall, the main development opportunity they see in Oro Valley is allowing mixed-use development to support commercial areas. Now, our third group we'll be looking at is about compatibility. And what we heard last year, especially from those who attended events or posted comments online, is that people really value the aesthetics of Oro Valley. They find it's well planned and cohesive and fits into the environment, blends into the environment well. Also, when it comes to height, the majority of residents, as you can see, want to make sure that views of the mountains are protected, as those make Oro Valley unique. And 14% of residents, though, do think 4 to 5 story rental apartments are acceptable. And again, the development community, they would like the group to consider allowing architecture to be administratively approved by updating the standards so they leave less discretion. And then as part of that update to the design standards, looking at what are key design features versus add-ons that drive up costs for specifically for housing. And they did want the group to know that 3-story townhomes are popular in the market because they allow garages and rooftop patios. So please keep all of this in mind as we talk about compatibility and height. And then looking at EV, electric vehicle charging stations and utilities. So 50% of residents prioritize reducing carbon emissions by supporting electric vehicles. We also did hear some of this out at events for more charging stations. And there is a legal requirement for utilities, which is why it is being discussed this evening. Before we get into, whoops. All right, before we get into our conversation, I do want to mention that, again, the main goal here is to make sure that the plan represents residents. We reached out to the development community as stakeholders, but residents do take priority with the plan. And then also I want to remind folks of the ground rules. Specifically, we need everyone's help to make sure that this meeting is efficient and productive. Again, we have a lot to go through, a lot of various topics. And so I do ask that everyone stay focused and help keep the conversation moving forward. Additionally, land use is typically a hot topic with varying views, which is fine, but please remember to be respectful and remember our number one charge is honoring what residents said over the past year. And I believe everybody is pretty familiar with the whiteboard, but again, we will be using that for the rest of the evening. So if you do need to change your view, please use the navigation menu in the lower right-hand side. Also, just be careful to not delete anything because that will delete it for everyone. All right, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and share our whiteboard. Just one moment. All right. So this is our first of 2 whiteboards for tonight. So our goal is to definitely get through this whiteboard. I will be keeping time, but if possible, I would love us to get through this and still have some time just to talk about the amendment process and land use map. So we're ready for the meeting on April 14th. With that said, though, we're going to start with talking about central gathering area in orange. We'll then go over to mixed use and redevelopment, compatibility, and then we'll wrap up this board on electric vehicles and utilities. So I am going to navigate us over to the central gathering area. So for this, we did ask folks what qualities should a central gathering area have. And again, there's 58% of OV residents would like to have a gathering place or community space. The comments that you provided under this were categorized as shopping and dining options, entertainment and amenities, Kind of in line with that, there were more specific comments about the Performing Arts Center, having it be accessible, walkable with sufficient parking, mixed use, and then there were comments about location. So we're going to start over on the left column, shopping and dining options. I want to give everyone a moment to read through these, but if you have any questions, additional comments, or if you want to elaborate on something that you said on the board, please raise your hand. Right, looks like most people are done reading. So is there anything to add with regards to making sure our central gathering area has shopping and dining options? Okay, I'm gonna keep us moving, but we can always go back. The next two, I think we can talk about together. They were related to making sure there's entertainment and amenities. Specifically under entertainment was having grassy areas, shade, places for families and kids, and then performing arts was part of what we heard from residents, but also there was a lot of comments about how that's a fit in this area. Maybe it should be a separate thing, and then also some support for it. I do want to mention before we start the conversation, and Rosa and Hal, I think you are in these other conversations too. So please, if I represent those groups incorrectly, correct me. But I do want to mention that Performing Arts Center was discussed by some other resident working groups, and those groups did specify that it should be more than just performing arts. So like an arts, humanities, and cultural center. And also it's working with a nonprofit or another entity to do it versus the town doing it. So if that helps clear it up. And Rosa and Hal, please elaborate if I missed anything. Rosa?
I think someone also mentioned making sure that it accommodates all ages, like maybe having some youth programs and some children programs so that it accommodates the entire community and not just, older adults, so.
Yep, thank you, Rosa. Oops. And then Cheryl?
Just a question. The town, probably back towards sometime right before 2018 at least, the town partnered with Tahona Chol to have the Children's Museum there and a lot of different activities. I believe they have a stage and everything there now too. I like the arts. I grew up on the East Coast. I loved going to Manhattan and seeing the Broadway plays and everything. I don't think we have enough people here, given that Sun City has its own center and Saddlebrook has its, and I'm just not quite sure that it would be profitable enough to have it here, even though it would be nice. It's a nice, but is it I don't know what to say other than that. I just think it might be out of our range currently, given the economic conditions.
Thank you. I'm getting your comment down. And then Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the nicest performing arts venues in the area on the north side is actually a high school auditorium, Foothills, Catalina Foothills High School. And my thought is it would be nice if we, 2020 hindsight, would have partnered with Amphi to do something like that at Ironwood Ridge. Maybe it's still possible going forward to do something like that in partnership with Amphi.
Okay, and Tom, I'm sorry, what school did you say was a good example?
Catalina Foothills High School.
Thank you. And then Matt?
Yeah, I've been to a number of just, arts in the park kind of a thing, where they just have a small stage and people listen to music or people watch a play. I mean, those things are a lot less expensive than, building buildings, of course. And we already have some buildings around that we would, if we put in a performing arts center, I'm sure the Gaslight Theater would be less than pleased. So just a thought, maybe scale it back a little bit and, performances in the park, either at, probably at the marketplace, but you could even do it at Steam Pump. I mean, they already have concerts there. Just make those sorts of things available.
Thank you, Matt. We'll go Joe and then Rosa.
Well, I agree with Matt and Tom and what happened to Shirley. The economic development has talked extensively about the Performing Arts Center, and as a personal opinion, I just don't think from a audience attraction standpoint and economic standpoint, we'd be duplicating a lot of what is closely available, and we maybe could have gazebos or something like that, but the Performing Arts Center, I think, should be further down on the priority list.
Thank you, Joe. Hal or Rosa, then Hal, sorry.
So, basically, the Performing Arts Center was the sole topic of was it the cultural group, Melina? Because I'm losing track of the groups. They're all kind of blending together. So I totally hear what you're saying, because there's a group of people who are very, very passionate about it and working with, trying to get a feasibility study going and all that good stuff. But I think once the feasibility study comes to fruition and they look at some of the things you're bringing up, I think that will become clear that, you will be competing with Gaslight Theater and places that are businesses, and maybe that wouldn't be such a good thing. But I just want to say that there's some people who are very, very passionate about this, and they're going to go forward individually, as a group. And I think that that's why it's getting a lot of, attention, because they're very motivated, I guess, to explore this. And they're talking about, I think 750,000 people venues. That's what they're talking about. In terms of they think the Gaslight is too small at 250. So that, and I kind of think the same way. I mean, you would probably fill that occasionally, but would you fill it regularly? I don't know. So, but I do know that I just want to say that, to be true to some of my other groups that I've been in, that, people are trying to be open-minded about this group that is going forward with a feasibility study.
Thank you, Rosa. Hal and then Stephanie.
Yeah, former town councilor Bill Rodman is not with us tonight, but he's obviously one of the primary promoters of this idea of a performing arts center. I don't know what form this would take. I think you have to have arts associated with any central gathering area, different kinds of arts. It could be programming in an outdoor space. It could be a building devoted to the arts, or a combination of things. I mean, you have the theaters, or the movie theaters at the marketplace that you got to wonder, how long that's going to survive. What happens to the building if they go out of business? So I think it's got to be opportunity driven, but certainly some kind of, there has to be a key element of a central gathering area that is devoted to the arts.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and in terms of, support, I do want to remind folks that the 58%, the performing arts was part of their responses to that survey question. And outside of the survey, even at events and online, we did hear a want for performing arts or a art center. Stephanie, then Sue.
Yeah, I think, I come from a small, relatively small community in Orange County in California. And, they built a community center there that had, an art gallery in it. It had a large auditorium where productions could take place, or, if they were having something at the high school that they thought they were going to get too many people and they needed a bigger venue, they could have it there. And it had, rooms you could lease or rent or whatever for events and stuff. Maybe something like that, that's a multi-use thing that isn't just dedicated to being a performing arts center. Because one of the things that drew me to Tucson that I really like about Tucson is the proliferation of performing art venues here in the city. I've never lived anywhere, including, in California, that had so many performing arts venues so close as we have here. So I don't know with the Gaslight and stuff if we need like a dedicated freestanding performing arts center as much as maybe an expansion or a community center that has, a number of uses that could also be performing arts if we want, if there was a particular event coming to Oro Valley that needed something like that.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. And you definitely mimic what we've heard from other groups, is it should be expanded to include all the arts, not just performing. And in terms of feasibility, I do hear all of your comments, but we probably won't solve that tonight, but that definitely could be reflected in the goal, policy, or action, making sure it's feasible before anything's done. Sue Ellen, then Cheryl.
Yeah, I agree with everybody about, we just have to remember about the financial feasibility, and also that if we do want to deal with the arts, we just drive down a little bit, and Tucson has fantastic places for us to go for artistic ability. Last night I was at Fox, and it was fabulous. And so I'm saying we do have a lot, and my concern is we just make it feasible financially. Okay.
Thank you, Sue. And Cheryl.
I'm just thinking whether we really do have to have all these things together, because I know when I was looking at that question when initially, I was wondering why they put the Performing Arts Center in there, because we've heard people would like to have a central gathering place. They didn't want it in main streets though. And I just am not positive that if that question had been a single question, do you want a performing arts center, whether the responses would have been the same. And also one other thing about the movie theaters, both the theater at Foothills and the one at Oro Valley Marketplace, they have a lot of the Fathom events there. So you can go on a day that they're doing the theater in New York City and actually watch it live. They take you backstage to see and talk with the actors and actresses. And then usually the following week or so, you can also watch like a rerun, a recorded event of that. So they have that. They have different concert type things that are available. And I've gone to a number of them. Sometimes I'm one of 4 people in the entire theater. So it's kind of disappointing, but because then you think, well, maybe they're not going to get them very much longer. But it is an opportunity to take advantage of these, great arts, the Metropolitan Opera, et cetera. Thank you.
Great. And thanks for sharing. I don't know how many people even know they do that. So maybe you'll see more now coming to the theater. Okay, so yeah, we could definitely look at suitable locations for it. But what I did hear, at least even through these comments and for other groups, is that arts in some way should be included in a central gathering area, performing arts or a arts venue, maybe separate. I'm gonna move us on unless, Sue, sorry, I didn't see did you raise your hand again? Or is that? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so moving us on, the next kind of category or comments people made were about making sure a central gathering area is accessible, walkable, and has sufficient parking, especially for events. So I'll give everyone a moment to read and forgive me while I try to move some of the comments so you can clearly see, but we're looking at 8, 23, 24, 25, and then further down. Michael?
So just want to add on my 25 item there. My thought there was the Main Streets one, when I heard that the thought was we were going to put parking on La Canada. That frightened me. That's a commuter route. Bring the speed limit down. So that's sort of what I was thinking, is like avoid that kind of idea where we're going to take one of the major arteries and we're going to slow traffic or put a bunch more traffic on it. So I wasn't sure if that was clear.
No, appreciate the clarification. Thank you, Michael. And I did want to ask folks about accessibility and walkability. Did anybody think of, I think one comment about being able to bike places. So what about connectivity? Is that important? Connectivity to other areas? Just want to pose that for folks too. How?
Yeah, comment number 27 was mine. And I tried to make that point that we should be able to get to this location wherever it's going to be, probably the marketplace, as easily as possible by various modes. So you shouldn't have to get in a car necessarily to get there.
Okay, so would you include like the loop in that, connecting to the loop, multi-use paths, things of that nature?
Sure. And that's why the marketplace has a big advantage, because you're right next to the loop there.
Sure, sure.
I don't have any trouble with having access by bike or walking or whatever. However, this is the desert. And if you're going to a movie or a theater or something like that in the middle of the summer, or actually starting probably sometime towards the end of May until the end of September, you're not going to want to do that and go sit in a theater being all hot and sweaty. So just a comment.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. And I think, Cheryl, to your point, that also plays the need for adequate parking too, because at some point you are going to drive there. Okay. Any other thoughts about accessibility, walkability, parking, connectivity? Okay. The next group, and these two we could almost do a little bit together as well. There were comments about mixed use, making sure that there's also it looks like residential, offices, retail, kind of all in the same area. And then in terms of location, this was kind of brought up in both of these categories. It does look like OV Marketplace was mentioned a lot. So I'll give folks a moment to read the information in both of these categories. And in terms of location, while you're kind of thinking and reading, you know, I understand the marketplace was definitely brought up, I think predominantly on here, but do you think it should be one central gathering area or multiple areas around the town? Are there areas, you know, nearby or other areas that could be community spaces? And I pose that because we did ask that in another group too, so. Rosa?
So I think people came up with some other locations, but truthfully, the reason why everybody says marketplace is because it's a huge property, you know, and we don't have a lot of huge areas that have the potential to become mixed use. So I think once the apartments go in and we see how that works, but you know, this is still a location where the festivals are, and this is, it kind of has created its own like central gathering, you know, importance already. And that's why I think everybody's focused on it. I don't know another area. I mean, I know some people made some other suggestions, but I don't know another area that would work. So I think that's why everybody is kind of focused, especially this side, like the northern part of Oro Valley versus like, you know, areas that are closer to the southern part. So you know, I think that, you know, it's basically has the most potential, you know, especially once we start getting some of the building and the construction going on in there and it starts taking shape. So, you know, I couldn't think of another area. I mean, I know some people said, well, there's some land on La Cañada on the kitty corner from the post office. But I looked at that land the other day when I was going by, and it's not that big. And it's got homes around it. And, you know, so there's a lot of areas that kind of present problems. But this area, the biggest problem was that it was underutilized. So I think that rezoning it and allowing housing is going to really help that central gathering thing take shape even more. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Rosa. Matt?
Yeah, the apartments they're putting in there are like 340 or so units, I think. And that's just the first one. Isn't there another one, a follow-up one on the other side? And then there's a couple of hotels. I mean, you think about that, and then, you know, the next closest spot would be Steam Pump. And, you know, it really doesn't have that much parking. It's on the loop. That would help. But, you know, to your point that, you know, bicycling down there in July is probably, it's good to go down there, but it's hard to come back. So yeah, then Naranja is the only other big piece of property, and it's pretty much filled in now. So, I mean, you're kind of looking at the marketplace is the number one option. So,
Thank you, Matt. And then C.M. McCarthy, and I apologize if you'll let me know your first name.
No problem. My name's Colleen. I just haven't had time to go in and fix up Zoom and all of that. I'm a big fan of mixed use. My one concern is a lesson learned from the Tangerine, Rancho Vistoso, and proposed Woodburn construction last year of mixed affordable housing and commercial is the impact on neighborhood streets. what they were planning on doing from a transportation standpoint in that area would have made it impossible for the 24 homes in my area to really get out of our homes and out of the street, get onto the main streets. So again, I truly believe in mixed use. I saw it work in San Jose when I worked up there in transportation. It's a great way to gather things together and give people opportunities to do more. And but you have to watch out for the neighbors and make sure that the neighbors feel that they are not being taken advantage of.
Hey, thank you, Colleen. Cheryl?
Just real quick to reiterate what Colleen said, not only was the traffic an issue, but in potentially other locations that are right next to residential areas, the noise could be a factor. Because I'm fairly close to Safeway down, in the development, but fairly close. And when the town did the fireworks at Naranja Park, with my doors and windows all shut, I could hear them from my home. And I think when they did the ones up on the closed golf course, the Vistoso Trails, that the noise was a big factor for the people that live surrounding that. So that's something else, that it has to be a good property that's not good sized property that's not close to other homes.
Great, thank you. All right, that's actually a good segue from you all to talk. We did have some other comments, but I believe they were more questions about how to define central gathering area, which you guys all helped with. So that's a good segue though to our next section, which is we're now in the purple area, looking at mixed use zoning and redevelopment. And so why I say that's a good segue is I think somebody did bring up noise in this column as well. But I kind of wanted to start this discussion off before we get to your comments that you provided through the homework, is making sure we're all on the same page of what do we mean when we say mixed use. So if you would raise your hand and let me know what came to your mind when you answered this question, or when you think mixed use, what does that mean to you? Randy. Oh, Randy, you're muted. Hold on one moment.
All right, sorry about that. Mixed use to me is commercial and residential. I think in my mind, if you go past the work that's happening in Foothills Mall, that's my view of mixed use.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Tony. We haven't heard from you yet tonight.
Yeah, I concur with it. In my visual of a mixed use, I'm looking at what's happening down at Foothills Mall. And I think mixed use is, restaurants, entertainment, people living there, have a sort of a urban vibe to it. So if Foothills Mall turns out to be a success, that would be a good model for us to look at.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, we're gonna do Joe, then Hal and Rosa, and then we'll move over to our next category.
I think mixed use is a commercial residential. Then within each of commercial and residential, for example, residential mixed use to me would it be single family homes or apartments or casitas as a subset? And then in commercial, a subset would be, are you attracting restaurants, or are you attracting smaller businesses? So I think mixed use is a broad term that needs to be maybe a little more better defined.
Okay, thank you, Joe, Rosa, and Hal.
So mixed use, the really good mixed use takes into consideration the needs of the people that are going to be in the housing when you mix housing with commercial. So that you reduce like traffic by keeping people in the same area, but by providing the amenities that they need. I'll give you two examples. When I used to live in Annapolis, and there was an old shopping center area that was just falling apart, and they revitalized it into a mixed use construction, and it completely changed the area. The building is really, really tall so that you can see the water, even though this parole area is nowhere near the water. But what the bottom of the mixed use is the biggest Whole Foods in the country, a dry cleaner, a cafe, a couple restaurants. So basically anyone living in that building could like get a lot of their needs taken care of. So that's a good example. What they didn't do were good traffic studies, and it just obliterated the roads there. The traffic is awful. You cannot get around there at all anymore. But if you live in the mixed use building, you wouldn't need to. And so Marketplace, what I look at there is, after those apartments are built, maybe some of the properties that are rented now to like, some things that maybe they weren't looking at putting in there, because like what you want to have in there is like things that keep the people there. So restaurants, a grocery store, which they have in the Walmart, all the things that keep people from getting out on the roads. And I think that once the apartments come in, you're probably going to even see the retail change there and be more supportive of like, because they have this captive, so that's really good mixed use. Creates like a little environment of its own. And so that's what I think is successful. What isn't successful is when you just put commercial at the end of a shopping, a community area, like an apartment area, where the commercial has nothing to do. Like, for example, a paint store in front of an apartment complex. How much paint do you need? You know what I mean? But a restaurant in front of an apartment complex, or a cafe or something like that. So that's what I think of as mixed use. And really good mixed use, takes into consideration the needs of the people in the housing.
Great. Thank you, Rosa. Good points. Hal and then Tony.
Yeah, I've been jotting down notes as people have been talking. I've heard some good comments, especially Rose's. I agree with what Rosa said. If you're going to have a mix of commercial and residential, it's got to be complementary. The commercial's got to meet the needs of the residential area. They've got to be in close proximity so people can walk within the mixed use area. You don't want to have people getting in their cars and driving from one part to another. You can have either vertical or horizontal mixed use. In other words, you can have a building that's first floor retail and then residential above, or you can have part of the area that's just residential and part that's commercial. You can do it in different ways. Generally, the residential is going to have to be higher density. It's not really an area for single family. And as I said before, it's got to be walkable, which means it's got to be well connected. And then lastly, I think obviously you're going to have parking, but the parking lots should be designed so they're not real prominent, smaller in scale. You don't want a big sea of asphalt in the middle of a mixed use area.
Thank you, Hal. And then Tony?
Yeah, I too, in my vision of a mixed use, would be stores on the first floor or ground floor, and then maybe condos. Because what I don't think of in a mixed use is single family homes like we live in. I think of condos and maybe blocks of townhouses. Okay, that's all for now.
All right, so that kind of gets us to our next column, which is market. And so on that note, actually, in terms of the market, I'll give you guys a moment to read these, but a lot of the comments are considerations about the types of businesses, that it will be market driven, the impacts, the economic impacts for making the area successful. Looking at other towns. And I do want to remind folks that, again, we reached out to the development community as stakeholders, and they did mention that they find that the highest potential for development in Oro Valley would be mixed use areas to support some of the existing commercial areas. And we've also, as you guys have all noted tonight, seen this starting to happen in Oro Valley with the marketplace. But even before, and even with the proposals for First and Tangerine. But even before that, some of our most successful commercial centers have higher density around them, and that mix of what you guys all define as mixed use of commercial and residential. So that's even including where the Dutch Bros is, where Mod Pizza and all of that kind of row is. You have the apartments next door, and even Steam Pump, even though those apartments are kind of at the end. And I do want to mention that what we've heard though is that sometimes having the, there's, when you talked about defining mixed use, you guys both brought up, some of you brought up they could be side by side, next to each other, or more interconnected. And so sometimes that also is based on the market, on what folks propose in that regard. Tony?
Yeah, when you mentioned the area north of Steam Pump, those apartments, when I'm in that, I don't have a sense of commercial mixed use, because they're not all connected together. They're there, the buildings are there, but there's not a sense of them being there together. And I don't know if it's landscaping or what. But I would not like that effect at Marketplace if we went that way. You need to feel connected to each other.
Good point. Thank you. Any other thoughts about the market, feasibility, or let's see, I think we talked a lot about these even in defining mixed use. Okay, I'm going to move us on. There are also comments about kind of on that same token of what you guys were talking about is the relationship between housing and commercial. So heard from a couple of you about complementary uses, but also consideration of population density, the types of housing in these areas, and then also if high density housing in commercial areas needs to bring commercial with it. Okay, so it looks like everybody's done reading, but what are people's thoughts on the number 77 with regards to, or both 50 or 77, but does this group, what do you think about making sure that the housing brings in commercial as well? Colleen?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I have to, having only lived here 2 years, all I have from a development standpoint is what they were talking about doing again at Tangerine and Rancho Vistoso and Woodburn. And we never heard from the developer what the commercial spots were going to be, but apparently there were a number of them. And I think it's going to be important that there is clarity about both what the housing is, plus what the commercial, and I think the commercial should support the community that is living there as well as those surrounding it. And I just think there needs to be truth. One of the concerns that our neighborhood had was there was some interesting dialogue about the kind of housing it was, calling it luxurious casitas and housing, when in fact it was affordable housing. And I think affordable housing makes a whole lot of sense. We need it in this world. But let's be very clear as we're dealing with the community about what it is that we're building, what is going in there, and that there are opportunities for conversation.
Great, thank you, Colleen. I do want to let folks know, especially if you haven't had a chance to talk yet, please make sure you're raising your hand, but also feel free to use the chat if you're more comfortable or if that works with what you have going on. We'll still get the most important thing is that we hear your voice. Any other thoughts about the relationship between housing and commercial? Rosa.
I do think from listening to all the conversations about this and all the different groups, that one of the things that's most important is not just adding people, but adding, revenue through the businesses. So there should definitely be, a mindset that the mixed use should focus on the fact that we need to be revenue generating, and that when we couple the commercial with the residential, we should look to things that are going to really boost the economic picture, because when we add people, we add services. So to offset that and to improve our financial picture, we have to be mindful in a mixed use commercial housing situation that commercial is retail in the form of the kind of retail that generates revenue.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Get it, girl.
Sorry. I don't know if folks have been up to Scottsdale area and been to Carolyn Commons, but Carolyn Commons is kind of a mixture of, the Westin Hotel is right there. And then also there's, beautiful avenue of retail shops with residences above them. I don't know if the residences are apartments or condos or what they are exactly, but
sorry. Okay, go ahead. I do ask everyone stay muted unless you're speaking, just so we don't get background noise. Stephanie, please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I was just going to say, I think Carolyn Commons is like a perfect example of a successful commercial and housing mix. Personally, I would love to live there, be able to, come down from your place and, all kinds of restaurants to choose from and all kinds of great shopping and stuff. And plus the hotel is there and you can walk over and use all the amenities of the hotel and stuff. It's a perfect model for a mix of commercial and housing.
Great, thank you. And then Tony?
I've been there, and that would be a perfect model too. Another model would be down on the more south of there on Camelback, Fashion Square, but that seems to have more density as far as apartments or condos and traffic than Carolyn does. So I would go with that for people to go see.
Okay. And then Stephanie, I don't know if your hand's up again. Nope, okay. Oh, and then another example is, oh, Carolyn comments, thank you. I will spell that correctly. Thanks, Sandy. Okay, we will fix that typo after. Then looking at location for mixed use, so there were comments about making sure the location doesn't impact existing residential, identifying locations where this is a good fit, and reinforcing that location does matter as shown with Oracle and INA. So again, we're not trying to maybe specify locations, but if there's locational factors that should go into it. Any additional location comments? I think most people are. Okay. Then there is comment about process in terms of something to consider, looking at the review policies and procedures to be more business friendly. Tony.
Okay. I think it's good that we're difficult to work with. It might be that we're sticking to our standards. And that's what makes Oro Valley attractive architecturally and the planning and the landscapings that they do. So I don't think that's a bad thing. Just stick to your standards.
Cheryl?
I agree. I remember years ago when Bayer had an article in the Explorer that talked about how you could drive up Oracle Road and see immediately when you got into Oro Valley because of the different standards that were just right along that corridor. And I do also think that it's good that we have these things. I also read in that packet of developer comments that they completely would like to take the residents' input out of that. And I think that is most valuable because they're the ones that know about the traffic and the drainage and the other local issues that if we didn't have give the residents an opportunity to bring that out, we would never know. That's bad. And I also complained about our impact fees, but I looked up Marana and Pima County. Pima County looks like it's sky high compared to us. So I don't know why that, unless they don't develop anything in Pima County, why they would say anything about that. So when was the last time we actually updated our impact fees? Do you know?
Oh, it was a couple years ago. I can't think of the exact date though.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay. Thanks.
But it was within the last 3 years, I want to say. 3 or 4.
Yeah. That's about, I think Marana's was 23. So.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. Who's on the iPhone?
Oh, sorry, that's Mike. Apologize. Sorry. So I agree that Oro Valley should have high standards and we shouldn't sacrifice those things. But I think from the developer perspective, when everything has to go through a very detailed process and it's an unknown process, and I think that's while there should be obviously opportunity for public input, our standards require everything to go through a very public process, which just makes it very difficult to enter. And again, it's multiple years to get anything through anything of significance through. So if we really want these mixed use processes, I think the way to do it is to update our standards to be to what we want. But then once we have those standards, I think making the process a little more streamlined for developers is the key. So I think that's I mean, there's a balance there, obviously, with all this kind of thing, but Oro Valley is difficult to deal with, and so everyone just avoids it, and that's not proving, to be the most effective development. So I don't know. There's not a right answer here. There's a balance point, but I think we should try to make it a little more known, the process, or a little more set process for the developers, so they don't shy away from us. And so that's my input there.
Thank you, Mike. We'll go Mary and then Hal. Mary, you'll need to unmute.
A lot of people right now.
If I raised my hand, it was a mistake.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Mary.
Sorry.
All right, Hal, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. I tend to agree with Mike's comments. I think we should have high standards. There's nothing wrong with that. I think, though, we should be really clear about what the standards are. People should clearly understand what we want. We shouldn't have some vague wording that people have they're subject to a lot of interpretation. So, and if you have to take time for interpretation, that means you have to extend the process, the review process. There's confusion. I think that's the key, is have clear and objective standards, and you make them as high as you want to.
Great, thank you, Hal. Joanne and then Kristen.
So I think that our high standards are why we look the way we look. And we keep seeing over and over again and keep hearing about how people want Oro Valley to stay the way it is. So if you go and make our business, our standards different, it's going to change the way our town looks. That's all.
And what I'm hearing, and hopefully I'm summarizing well, is everybody seems to be in agreement that the standards need to stay high. It's just a matter of maybe the process for those standards. Kristen and then Tom.
Hi, Melanie and all. A couple of things that I just wanted to respond to a little bit. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, whoever spoke last, but Oro Valley is beautiful, and you're right. We don't want to give up our beautiful roads and our views and our parks. But unless we figure out how to increase revenue to the town, we will absolutely not be able to maintain those wonderful things that we love and keep Oro Valley the way that it is. So how do you do that? Primarily, you do that through sales tax and state shared revenues. Sales tax obviously is provided by businesses. State shared revenues is allocated upon a lot of things, but the primary one being population density. So in order to get those things, we can't be so adverse to businesses coming in. The chamber serves as the de facto visitor center for Oro Valley because there isn't one. So we have a lot of people visiting, not just, people from out of town visiting, but we get a lot of residents coming in and, trying to figure out what there is to do in Oro Valley. And we constantly hear, oh, I wish we had more things to do and I wish we had more restaurants. Well, as we've heard, retail and restaurants don't want to come here because it's not easy to. It's not easy to open a business here. In fact, it is very difficult, much more difficult than any of our neighboring communities. And so that's why they're seeing growth. And we're not seeing as much as they are, even though you would think Oro Valley would be a wonderful place to bring those cool things because our residents want it. I don't know if any of you saw the recent retail leakage study that was conducted by the town, but the amount of money that Laurel Valley residents are spending on retail and restaurants not in Laurel Valley is shocking. It is absolutely shocking, especially like even when looking at the fact that they're spending money at places that we already have. And so, and a lot of that is because we just simply don't have those places that they're spending money on. So how do we fix that? We try to recruit those places here to Laurel Valley. But again, they don't want to come here because they're getting charged extra money by their planners and architects and everybody else just to do business in Laurel Valley because it takes so much longer to get anything through the process, and time is money. And when it takes an extra year for a business to open, sure, if they're a corporate business, they can absorb some of that cost, but your mom and pop can't. And, you know, I feel like those are the types of the businesses that we usually like to have in Laurel Valley that are aesthetic. And if we want those businesses able to open and thrive in Laurel Valley, we need to make the process easier.
Thank you, Kristen. Tom, Randy, and then Rosa.
I just want to put a little historical perspective, and I'm sure Bayer could speak to this. In my view, the process that we have now is a lot more streamlined than it was 10 or 15 years ago. I know there was a lot of effort put in about that time frame to streamline the process, and I think we've gone a long ways. And like everybody's already said, I'd hate to see our standards decrease any to make it more streamlined.
Randy, Rosa, and then Paul, if you want to go after Rosa.
Yeah, I agree. We ought to keep the standards the same. And process is because different parts of organizations sometimes don't talk to each other as well as they should. Would be to provide an ombudsman to the developer, someone in the planning department who actually worked with the developer to be the guide at the side, if you will, to help them through the process and make it a little more, streamlined and then just get through it. So an ombudsman might be a quick option to improve that.
Okay, thank you. Rosa?
I just wanted to say that I had heard that, it's a little bit more difficult to open a business in Oro Valley, but I really, the more of what I heard was that it just isn't sometimes financially feasible because of the population. But a lot of these businesses won't locate even if we doubled our population. So you have to kind of look at it from a perspective of, what trade-offs you have to accept in a town versus, a large city. And I think a lot of people want to preserve a lot of what we have in Oro Valley in terms of the feel of the community and the size of it. And then the realities of that just have to be dealt with. But as far as the leakage report, I kind of went over that pretty clearly myself. And what I saw is just, shopping patterns. Like, for example, if I'm on my way to the airport, I'm going to go to the McDonald's in Marana because it's on the way to the airport. It isn't because I don't like Oro Valley, So I don't think there's a whole lot you can do with that leakage report in terms of changing behavior. If the person is shopping at the big Target that's not in Oro Valley because their kid has a project to do, and when they went to the Target in Oro Valley, they could only get 2 of the 15 things they needed. And so it's just shopping patterns and behaviors. And I think that's what it revealed. I thought it was fascinating, but I thought that's more of what it revealed. And then maybe like if we could ever land a destination type restaurant, that would be, or a destination type business, like a business that you would drive to, that would be kind of the focus of it. So I don't think we should lower our standards. And if our process is that bad, then somebody should be addressing it. And, I think it's more that you do your due diligence in terms of population and potential success of your business. And even a lot of franchises will do that work for you and tell you not to locate in a certain area. So it's just about success of business. And Oro Valley has some realities that don't work with every business.
Sure. Thank you, Rosa. And maybe just to reiterate, what I've heard is, yeah, not lowering standards, keeping the standards high. But I guess, and I think Mike brought this up and Hal did too, is, is there opportunity to look at processes for uses that, for types of developments that the residents prioritize, like retail, restaurants, and mixed use. Without lowering standards. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Malini. I wanted to give the group some food for thought because as you talk about processes, there are two distinct areas where you could look to gain efficiencies. The first one is taking a look at the time or the process that it takes to secure the necessary entitlements to get the proper zoning to then develop a business. And then there's the post-entitlement period that you're looking at for permits to get the grading, construction, development, and then get through the inspection process. And I did want to mention that the town does have a business liaison in Margie Adler where we do that. So at the onset of the development process, we have a person to help provide that guidance through there. So I just wanted to bring up if somebody wanted to talk about the differentiation between securing necessary entitlements, meaning rezoning, conditional use permits, development plans, and architecture, all of those things versus actually, once you've secured all of that, to get the necessary permits to open.
Thank you, Paul. I also want to mention that Bayer has put some more information in the chat if anybody wants to check it out, especially the questions about the review process as well as when impact fees were updated. Okay, I am going to move us on for time, and it looks like there weren't any other hands up, but next with regards to mixed use and redevelopment is making sure parking is being considered, especially as places are redeveloped, that there's sufficient parking. We heard about traffic, also making sure that's being considered as well. As somebody mentioned earlier, it could impact existing traffic amounts. And then let's do compatibility at the same time, because I think it kind of also goes into what we were just talking about with making sure that the design standards are high, the architecture is compatible, it's consistent with the character of the area, neighbors are also aware and on board with the proposals, and then noise as well, which we've talked about, Cheryl brought up earlier. Give everyone a moment to read through these. It looks like most people are done reading. Any other comments about parking, traffic, compatibility with regards to redevelopment and mixed use areas? How?
Well, there's been a national trend recently to reduce, if not totally do away with parking standards. And that's because of a lot of criticism from a whole bunch of folks, starting, I guess, with the late Donald Shoup, who was a professor of urban planning at UCLA, who passed away recently and wrote a book called The High Cost of Free Parking. If you have too much parking, you're taking land that might have been developed and generated revenue, and it just sits there. So it's a balance. You want to have enough parking so you don't have parking overflowing into adjacent neighborhoods and things like that. But at the same time, you don't want to have parking lots that sit half empty most of the time. And so I think it's critical that the town give a lot of consideration to the present parking standards and look at what other jurisdictions are doing regarding parking.
Okay, thank you. And Cheryl?
I have a question. Were the parking lots placed in the front of these shopping areas for due to safety reasons for?
Like the existing shopping areas in Oroville?
Yeah, the ones that we have now, because I'm thinking if I was going down Oracle Road, I don't know necessarily that I would want to park behind some of those strip centers that are along there. If it was nighttime or whatever, we have a nice, safe town, but you don't want to go out in the dark behind a building necessarily.
So on Oracle, part of that is because of the Oracle Road Scenic Corridor overlay, which on the east side does push the buildings kind of further back off the road. And so some of that is because of code, and then others may just be choice. I'm not sure.
Thanks.
Oh, and Buyer, did you want to?
Sure, I can add a little bit to that. Cheryl, I think a lot of it is driven by developer choice. There's always a desire, it seems, to make sure all the parking's out front, almost as a sign, hey, we have plenty of parking. Our code asks for distribution of parking mainly at the front and the sides. And I hear you, putting it in the back without a lot of good design focus brings up all kinds of problems. But if it's done smartly, think about the Whole Foods at Ein and Oracle. It's where all that parking is in the back, but they also switched facades to the back as well. Oro Valley Marketplace is an example of parking that's not traditional. Usually all the parking is along the major road, right? And then the big box. So you're absolutely right. You have to be careful how you do it. But a focus of our code is trying to break up parking, whether it's with, we require more landscape islands and whatnot and separations. I'm sure you've noticed there are more trees in Oro Valley parking lots than there are in the city of Tucson or Pima County. There is an emphasis on breaking up the fields of parking, but you got to be very deliberate on how you're doing that to avoid the problems that you're mentioning. So.
Thank you, Mr. Vella. Other comments about compatibility, or I'm going to move us on to our next area. Okay. So, Don?
I just wanted to make a comment that front or back, I think our code is such that you can feel relatively safe. I don't believe we have any dark parking lots at any of our shopping areas, etc. I feel quite safe going to any of the parking lots on here when it comes to a light factor. Just wanted to put that in, that we really do have bright parking lots.
Thank you, Don. All right, so kind of continuing on that compatibility as our next area where we specifically asked folks, asked you all, how can Oro Valley's built environment blend with surrounding uses, natural environment, and maintain views? Again, if you want for reference, the resident priorities are in the yellow box. But starting off, there were comments about architecture, making sure the design standards are enforced, that they blend in the surroundings, using colors for the natural environment. Any additions about architecture? And I know we, again, spoke earlier about making sure that the design standards stay high and considering that any changes would change the look of Oro Valley. Cheryl. Oh, you're muted, Cheryl. There you go.
I'll just bring it up again, even though I mentioned it before. When they wanted to do the rental homes at the corner of Tangerine and La Choya, they did not fit with the look of Oro Valley. And I just think if that had been done, it would have looked like a real outcast as you're driving in Tangerine Road to see them. No, it's not that they were a bad design. It's just that they're not the right fit for Oro Valley, in my opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then Dan?
You know, one of the things that I consider for architecture is the signage for the commercial entities. Some of them have signage that is almost as large as the main front entrance of the business. And I'm really extremely pleased with the type of signage codes that we have. And I think that needs to be reinforced on that. And that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, so the next two columns we can kind of look at a little bit together. So when it came to height, there were comments about limiting building height, some for specific types of uses. And then subsequently, in the next column, there are also comments about limiting height, but also the possibility of having taller buildings in specific areas. So making that more location based. So I'll give you a moment to read through these comments. So we're at 59 to about 74. And the numbers aren't sequential, so. Rosa?
So when I read this, I immediately flipped the 14 to 86% don't want 4 and 5 story buildings, because that's all I hear. Like, you know, and it's basically, you know, become a mantra of a lot of the residents here that they want to keep the low profile buildings. I do agree that in a select situation, it may not be bad. The problem is finding that situation, you know, where it doesn't impact views, where it goes with the landscape. I've heard a lot of complaints about the new retirement place that was at La Posada. Anyway, I hear a lot of people saying that they feel it doesn't fit that area because of its height. So I just think it's one of the biggest sticking points in Oro Valley. And, you know, I attended all the neighborhoods meetings on Marketplace, and I heard repeatedly people rejecting the height of the proposed building there. And when I see the one in Foothills, I mean, obviously that one's a little bit bigger in scale, but it's hard to imagine what a building looks like until you like see it built, even when they put balloons up or put things up in the landscape to help you. But when I see the Foothills building, even though that one's a slightly bigger profile, I try to imagine what that would look like in Tangerine Road. And, you know, I think we got it right by limiting the size of the height of the apartments there. I really do think we got it right. Now, on the other side of the road, is it as bad? I personally don't think it's as bad, because I think now that it's built, it doesn't stick out as much as I think some people think it does. But I think it's just one of the biggest sticking points in Oro Valley. And I think that you just have to hear people, and you have to kind of respect that point of view, because I think that strong feeling is what has kept Oro Valley, you know, the way it is. So.
Great. Thanks, Rosa. And I do want to just clarify the 14%. So it wasn't that 86% thought it wasn't acceptable. 54% thought that 4 to 5 story rental apartments weren't acceptable. The rest were either neutral or had no opinion. So it's not exactly a one side versus the other with the survey. Tony and then Dawn.
Okay, maybe my memory needs refreshing, but Splendido has 4 stories, I think. But their architecture blends, in my mind, blends much better than the architecture at La Posada. La Posada, I don't know if it needed a different style, something more desert-like, something more, I don't know what. To me, it looks like California.
Sure.
And that's just my comment.
Thank you, Tony. And I got it down. Don, you can. And Don, you're muted if you're.
Yeah, I just got to get over to that little audio squealy there. This is a subject of which is near and dear to my heart, having spent about 10 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I'm going to say this with as much objectivity as I can. I think building height in this community has become a red herring in that people use it to block most any kind of construction in town, and it's kind of the go-to thing. When you take a look at, and I'll have to bug you with some statistics here. When we were talking about Marketplace and we were talking about 3, 4, and possibly even they threw in some 5-story. I studied very closely the heights around the Marketplace. And that I'll give you some interesting, what I find interesting. From the intersection of Tangerine and Oracle, if you're at that intersection, the ground on which the hotel would have been bought, the Tangerine entrance to the Marketplace, sitting at that intersection, you are 100 feet higher than grade level when you enter the thing. So you would actually be looking at the roof of that hotel, and the only residents that would have anything blocked at that point would be the very bottom ones of Cat Shadows. It would block their view of the hospital, and I don't know that anybody would worry about that. We had the hospital is a 5-story building. La Posada is a 5-story building that you can only see from actually the west side, the east side of Oracle. When you really get close, when you're a block away in many places, you can't see it. And I can remember the discussion when we were looking at the balloons that were put up, the height poles that were put up on the back of it, where the La Posada was going to be, and someone made the comment about when they were going to be 5-story buildings. Someone made the comment, could you make it 7 stories, because it really blocks, that would then block the nasty back of Home Depot. So height and the buildings in Marketplace, unless you're standing right next to them, I don't know, you're 3/4 of a mile to any house in Rancho Vistoso. So I just caution everybody. And I'll throw this in. There was recently a motion made at Town Council where an individual made a motion that said that 86% of the people actually it said 87%. 87% of the people who responded in the early surveys said that 4 and 5 stories were inappropriate. I will sit here and I will challenge anyone on this feed or anywhere else to find that statistic, because it's not there. I don't know where that came from, but it just simply is not there. And I'm going to bring this same argument up when we get into the land use thing. But I look upon a lot of the comments that are made about, oh, it's too tall, it's too tall, it's going to block. When somebody says, you look at that beautiful view of the mountain, how many people look at the base?
Yeah.
You look right up at the top of to the mountain, which is about 10,000, between 10,000 and 11,000 feet, I think. We had a council member about 7, 8, 10 years ago that said he has never found a 3, 4, 5-story building to block the top of the view of the mountain. So I think it's about time that we get really objective about building heights and blocking the views of someone. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Don. And yeah, and I did clarify with what the survey said, so I appreciate it. And we'll again, tonight we're not gonna get probably consensus on the building height, but we definitely want to get all the comments down. We'll be talking about building height a little bit more in other meetings as well, but appreciate it. Kim?
Hi, can you hear me okay? This is my first time speaking tonight.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna echo Dawn. I think so 82% of Oro Valley residents prioritizing maintaining views, I think goes beyond building height. It's lighting and it's being consistent and adherent to design and architecture. So I think that we need to be more broad in what it means to address preserving those views. I see a lot of comments that have to do with building height, and I agree with Dawn. That's not the be all end all. There are many more considerations to be put in the lump with that. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Kim. And Stephanie, and then we'll move on. Stephanie and Kristen, then we'll move on.
Okay, perfect. Somebody was mentioning earlier about La Posada and something about it that just doesn't seem to fit. I think part of what, at least for me, I guess it depends how taller buildings are built, perhaps, because as someone mentioned, Splendido, the way that they've done those buildings, there's variety through the building, so you really don't sense that it's this monolithic presence. On the other hand, La Posada, the way it's been built so far, it's very monolithic. It's not in keeping with the character of any of the other buildings in Oro Valley. It looks very institutional. And, I understand it is a senior living situation. But I think Splendido is a perfect, example of the fact that even in that situation, it doesn't have to look like that. And so, if we're going to talk about taller buildings, then at least we need to have standards for making sure that they fit with the character of Oro Valley. And I think La Posada is an example of a building that doesn't fit with the character of Oro Valley. And if we have if they, for example, are going to be building taller buildings around the marketplace, whether it obstructs views or not, even if it doesn't obstruct views, I think it's important what is approved by City Council as far as the appearance, because I'm real surprised that the La Posada, development was approved with the look that it has.
Sure. Thank you, Stephanie. So I did get your comment down about the design and breaking up the mass through design. Kristen?
I think part of the reason that La Posada is so stark right now, and in the comparison between La Posada and Splendido, is, correct me if I'm wrong, but Splendido's been there for 20 years. And so they have a lot of mature vegetation growing up around it right now. I think we need to give La Posada some time to get some of that vegetation to grow up and around it and block some of the things that we don't like to see. To Don's point, in most places you can't even see it until you're about a block away. I will say that I would stand behind putting in the guidelines, preserving Oro Valley's views 100% all day, every day. What I do not stand behind is putting a arbitrary limitation nothing taller than 2 stories or nothing taller than 3 stories. Because to Rosa's point, we may not know, like something that goes in north of Tangerine, it might work there. You know, we don't know what's going to happen. This is a 10-year plan. We don't know if we're going to annex state land or anything like that. And there might be maybe places where that makes sense, that it would be the best for the community. I can't imagine not having Oro Valley Hospital put in because we had an arbitrary limitation of 3 stories. So I think for our purposes for this guideline, preserve Oro Valley's views absolutely 100% every day, but don't put a limitation on it.
All right, I am going to move us on for time. And again, this isn't the last time we'll talk about building high and the wording and language for the actions, goals, policies, even the guiding principle. We will get to that in a future meeting. All right, so our next area was electric vehicles. 50% of residents prioritize reducing carbon emissions by supporting electric vehicles. And then the examples given were how to, or the question was, how can OV enable flexibility for private property owners who wish to install vehicle charging stations? So it was focused on private, not public, but looking at the columns, there were comments about not offering subsidies by the town, having private charging stations at various locations or keeping an eye on it as those become more popular, having them in commercial or high density areas, opportunities for them in homes, and then HOA common areas. So again, in essence of time, we're going to do some of these together. So if you want to read through the no subsidies and the charging, just keeping an eye on charging stations. Rosa?
So I have a question. Do we, and this is for buyer, do we have in our code a requirement that new construction provide a outlet in the garage of the home for electric vehicle charging? And do we have any updated codes at all regarding electric vehicle charging stations in our code now, like for businesses, for whoever might want to put them in?
So when it comes to building codes and new construction, we don't require that in the garage. The city of Tucson does. And Oro Valley's on the cusp of updating building codes, so that may be a good discussion item. It is a good discussion item. Our zoning codes are fairly silent about it. And so, you know, I think there is a need to be clear on it, that it is acceptable and encouraged in certain areas. So, yeah, we do need more clarity in the zoning code on that.
Yeah, because I noticed that new hotel construction usually provides 4 to 6. So we probably need to, because when I read these questions, I was like, I wonder what we are doing about that, because I know I've seen them. And I know there are businesses, like, for example, I've seen restaurants that put in charging stations, you know what I mean? Because they're located near a highway or near a situation where somebody might pass through, and they, a lot of people want to charge while they're dining. So I guess that was my big observation here. I mean, I think it's a good idea. And I also, I did a little Google search. There's a lot of money available to construct them, federal money. And you know, and so I think that there's probably some research that needs to be done on that, so that we can get in that plan, that 10-year plan, a way to address this, because it's here to stay, you know. So we probably should address it. But I would highly recommend requiring builders to put that outlet in, because I have a neighbor who just put one in and it cost him a fortune, you know, to go back and do it after the fact. And it's probably next to nothing for a developer to offer it as an option. I know in Maryland, in a home I just bought, it is a requirement, and you can't be charged for it. The developer has to put it in. So anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you, Rosa. I do want to let you know that, yes, several other folks on this call mimicked your statements about having them in homes and garages. So, Matt?
Yeah,
Oregon requires any new construction to have them in the garage. As far as the HOAs, we have enough problems. We don't need to add that to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And to your point, Matt, the comments under HOAs. So folks, we're kind of just talking about all the greens at once, which is great, no problem. But we're on the very last comment of the green. There was comments about the logistics of having them in HOA common areas and the maintenance of them with HOAs. So. All right. Any other comments about electric vehicle charging stations? Okay, I'm going to move us on to utilities. So utilities, it's an important part of development to talk about, but also is part of those legal requirements. So there is in the current general plan some actions related to utilities, especially specifically criteria. So we had asked all of you if you find the existing criteria acceptable. 18 people responded. So you can see here the overall, most people agree that they're all acceptable with regards to protecting the mountain views, coordinating with other projects. And then it gets a little lower when we talk about in open spaces, but only if it's absolutely necessary, and assessing suitable locations. There was one other comment to possibly add for consideration, which is the impact on existing homes. So if you have any comments about the existing criteria, if you want to talk about any of those, or if you have any criteria that you think should be added, please go ahead and raise your hand. John.
Crickets. That's my comment.
Good. All right, so just want to make sure, any comments on utilities? Okay, and again, it looks like most people were in agreement with the existing one. So I do want to give a little bit more information to help set us up for our next meeting on April 14th. So just give me one moment. Let me get back to our presentation. Okay. So more so in the next meeting, we are going to start talking about the amendments as well as the land use map. And so I do want to mention that, per state law, we do have to have in the plan the process of which to change it. Keep in mind, it is a 10-year plan, so it is expected to, it may need changes to make sure it stays relevant in a living document. So right now in our current plan, there are 2 types of amendments. I do want to mention that both are important and both are a big deal. So 10 years ago, it was very purposeful to not use terms like major or minor, which are currently how the state describes them. It was very purposeful because nobody wants to make sure, we wanted to make sure that type 2 didn't seem less than in terms of it being a big deal. So with that said, though, type 1 amendments are significant changes to the plan, and they do require more extensive meetings, public hearings, and a higher level of concurrence by council. And what constitutes a type 1? These were part of your questions for you to answer if these are still acceptable. So I don't want to spend too much time on these because we will discuss them in length. But you can kind of see there currently what's defined as a type 1 amendment. Type 2s are changes with less impact to the plan. They still involve public engagement, but not as rigorous as a type 1. And again, the way those are defined are shown in the orange box. Oops. So looking at the amendment process, you'll see in the chart, there's not a whole lot of difference between type 1 and type 2s in terms of the process. So both require at least 2 neighborhood meetings, and we did bold the word minimum on purpose. The type 1s do require also 2 public hearings with the commission, where type 2s only have 1. The reviewers are a little bit different, as well as the notice area and time frame. You'll also notice that the approval for type 1s is a supermajority vote by council, which is 2/3, where type 2s require just the regular majority vote. I do want to mention, though, that everything with an asterisk, that's required by state law. So those have to be in the plan at a minimum because of the legal requirements. So what we heard from residents when we talk about growth was that 68% are concerned about growth. They do want to see balance. That was mentioned through events and online. We also asked folks about what their preferred future for Oro Valley is. And 55% thinks that Oro Valley should be more self-sufficient with options to live, work, and play within the town limits. And 42% think Oro Valley should remain a bedroom suburb. So really what this means is we have about a 50-50 split. So the guiding principle is written in a manner to make sure that there's balance between both parties as well, and make sure that growth is being strategic to, again, meet the priorities that residents voiced over the past year. In terms of development and growth, OV is running out of land. We have 88% is either built or open space. But another 6% is awaiting construction, which means they have approved plans. So next, in 2 weeks, we'll really take a deeper dive into the land use map. But I do want to mention that what the land use map is, so all of you are prepared. It depicts the general uses that are allowed in Oro Valley and really provides the broad guidance to achieve resident priorities. And again, reminder that residents did prioritize more housing, more restaurants, retail, employment, and having balanced and strategic growth. Now, there is a relationship between the land use map, especially changes to those, and amendment process. We will be talking about land use map changes and how this group wants to handle those in the next couple meetings. I do want to mention something for the group to consider is if there are comprehensive changes to the land use map during this process, that might mean that you want to have a stricter amendment process because so many changes were made during the development of the plan. If there's no changes to the land use map right now in this process, it's decided that they should wait and go through the typical public review process after the plan's approved. That might equate to a less restrictive amendment process so that those can be done in the future with adjacent residents. Because no changes plus a strict amendment process won't provide the avenues to meet the resident priorities. So just keep that in mind as we get into these conversations about amendments, the amendment process as well as the land use map. Let's stop sharing, and I think there were some questions and hands raised. So, Don?
Yeah, I was just good. Has maybe off topic, and if so, just let me know that there is. Is there any plan in this overall process? We talk about neighborhood meetings, and that we need to have neighborhood meetings, et cetera, et cetera. And I have advocated, for several years that we really do need to take a hard look at what we are defining as a neighborhood meeting and who should be active in the neighborhood meeting. Should we have someone from Suffolk area talking about being influential in the neighborhood meeting in the north end of Rancho Vistoso, those things. So is there any plan to talk about neighborhood meetings and their composition and how they are conducted in this process?
So that definitely could turn into an action or something to look into. I don't think we'll resolve it or come up with specifics in this process, but it's definitely something that could become an action to explore and revisit the neighborhood meeting process.
Yeah, okay. And if there is a point at which if other folks would, maybe we just put a question, as a little side note, do you think we need to re-examine our neighborhood meeting and what it should be? And just so that we've got some kind of a statistic somewhere, an accurate statistic, I might add, into that question. Thank you.
You, Don. I do want to let you know, not only I am writing your comment down, but we also record the meeting, so we'll make sure we get it on the whiteboard.
Yes, I'm very well aware that you record the meetings, as we all know.
Michael and then Dan.
So I want to bring it up now just because I'm not sure when is the appropriate time to bring it up. The actual question that was asked about a self-sustaining community, I think was highly, highly biased. I can read it out to everyone if people want to discuss it, but I won't do that right now. But it's basically, should Oro Valley remain the same and have these bad things? Or should it be self-sustaining and have all these good things? And then it lists a bunch of stuff and some people voted for it. It gives us no information. I find it highly unlikely, based on the comments that I'm seeing from people, that we want to see a balance between work, live, and play. We've heard many, many comments that people sort of recognize we're a bedroom community. We want shops, we want things like that. But that whole question really bothers me. I would like to see the town to send out a real question and not, here's 50 things, tell me which ones you want, but sort of, it's like you only get to pick 3, or there's a certain cost to them, and have some kind of balance there. Because to me, the people I talk to, we have a very clear goal, is that we are a town with a lot of single family homes. Yes, we would like some things close by, but we're not willing to give up the single family homes and the small community feel for it. And I don't think we have the data to support that. I definitely can't take a look at the results of that survey and say, I take a look at that question. It's just, I really hate that question, the way it's phrased. And I wrote a fairly long, are we going to show those comments at some point, Eleni?
So the comments that you guys had on the amendment types, process, and land use map, we'll go through those in the next meeting. We're not going to have time to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my comment. I feel that was a misleading question, and we're missing the data to know what people really want. It covered too many things. It said what it is now is bad. We could be self-sufficient. Like self-sufficient, we'd grow our own food, which is not going to happen, right?
So, sure. So, that is one reason, though, we did try to clarify what self-sufficient mean, right? So people didn't think it was growing our own food. I will say, though, not regarding that question, I hear you about that question, but that is one reason the survey had various questions that had kind of some linkages and overlap. So we did also hear one of the most disliked things was traffic and lack distance to services and retail. So you're right.
But
Right now,
on your slide, though, you pulled out development related things, and so you're isolating all these things, and you're making it look like people picked that they wanted businesses and they wanted this and they wanted that. No, they want less traffic, they want views, they want the top
Michael,
3 things in each. What's that?
If I could finish, please. I was going to get to that. You're right. For this group, we're only focused on the development guiding principle. I can tell you in other groups, we're focused on those transportation ones. We're focused on all of it. So you're right. we didn't give this group all the responses, but that's where it's kind of helpful to have each group kind of working in these areas. And that's what we'll be doing over the summer is reconciling it all. So
Yeah.
there-
Oh,
and
sorry.
so
Can I go
that's
ahead?
just all I wanted to clarify about the
Yeah.
survey, but I hear
I
you.
think that is not the conversation we would be having because they're so interrelated. You cannot have jobs for everyone in Oro Valley and not have dense residential. I've lived in Boston, in Seattle, I've worked in New York. Even those places you can't be within a 15-minute drive of your work. It's Oro Valley, we moved here for a reason, and it's very frustrating to sort of see this message over and over again that we want to combine all these things together. I'm sorry, that's not what Oro Valley is. I really hope it doesn't turn into that, because that's not why we moved here. That's not why we bought here. I don't think that's why people want to come here. They know when they move to Oro Valley, you're going to have to commute to your job. We definitely want our teachers and our police officers to have a reasonable commute, but that doesn't mean that they have to live in Oro Valley. And we keep on saying this over and over again. It's frustrating to see the slides sort of portray something different ahead of time. That's the end of my rant.
Thanks,
Hear,
Michael.
hear, Michael.
Just want to let everybody know, though, all the responses from the survey are online and they're shared with each group. So we're not trying to keep any of the data away from anybody. Let's go though to Dan and then Kristen and then Rosa.
I wanted to inquire about, for our next meeting where we talk about the land use map. One of the things I encountered when I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission was there was land that was annexed from the county or given by the county, but the land was already designated of what use it would be. When you start laying out this map, what areas have already been designated and there's just no way to change it? So I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's what's transpired. But some of the development that's going on is that when we were given this land by the county, it was already approved and designated for what use it was going to be.
Yeah, no, great point, Dan. And so there is a distinction between land use and zoning, to your point. So sometimes, yeah, the zoning is already in place and land use is kind of that guidance of what we'd like to see, or sometimes it is what's there. Where the zoning is what really gives the property rights of what uses, setbacks, building heights, etc. With regards to other jurisdictions, you're right, our land use map does extend through to Pima County. And so we do, once we have a draft that we're ready to kind of start taking through the public hearing process, it does get sent to all surrounding jurisdictions as well. So they have an opportunity to see it before it goes through an approval process as well. So they're aware of what land uses we put on property. We're almost out of time, but I do want to get to Kristen and then Rosa, and then we'll head out for the night.
Thanks, Malini. And I just wanted to make a really quick point to Michael, and that the fact that the reason the town spent so long and so much time and so much energy into the public outreach process and the survey process was so that they could make it statistically Malini, you might have to help me with my words, extrapolatable or statistically representative of all of the residents in the town of Oro Valley. I will say that these resident working groups are not in the least bit representative of all residents of Oro Valley, because a lot of the families and people who are still working, they can't jump on these calls. Like I'm late all the time to these calls, and I'm on and off, and I keep my camera off because during these calls I'm picking up kids, I'm making dinner, I'm putting them to bed. And so I've been on a lot of these resident meetings, and I don't see hardly any families. There's a couple every once in a while, which is great. But typically that voice gets left out. So I will say that I know the comments sometimes in these working groups don't really match what we see in the in the results from the surveys, but those are representative of what collectively the town of Oro Valley has said that they want. And I think it's important that the resident working group, the purpose of it is not to push through our own agendas, but it's to look at the data of what the town said that they want and make the best decision for the entire group.
All right, so it is 7:30, so we're gonna do Rosa and then we're gonna sign off for the night. We'll continue this conversation on April 14th. I do want to remind folks that's an in-person meeting. We really need all of you there if possible because this is a good discussion. So definitely want to continue it. Rosa, you
So
want
I just want to say real quick, I was frustrated with the surveys too, but I've never liked a survey. I've never met a survey I liked. I think they're really hard to do. So what I did was just put some comments at the bottom, and I think you said you would put them up on the whiteboard and then we just talk about it. I mean, I think you have to do a lot of talking and yes, maybe people don't show up to the meetings and not everybody can do them. But I do think the consensus is there. And I think, yes, I was frustrated by the survey as well. And you saw my little frustration and I'm like, wait a minute, I want to make sure you know what I want here because I'm not sure these questions make sense, but we'll get there. And Malini, I do not envy your job because my head's about to explode and you're in more meetings than I'm in. So I think it's hard to get it all into a survey, but I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. And thank you, Colleen, for the question. The meeting will be at Town Hall in Council Chambers. So I will send a reminder out though for folks. And with that, again, I want to thank you. We did get through a lot. I knew our agenda was ambitious tonight, so appreciate it. And we'll continue the conversation in a couple weeks. Thanks all.